Okay, so we saw how this linear layout contains two children text views inside it. By the way, these background colors are just a teaching tool to help you understand that these two children text views are inside this parent. The red and blue colors actually won't show up on the device unless you specifically set them as background colors on these views. To show you what I mean, let's go to the XML visualizer. If we drop in the code to the XML visualizer, this is what it looks like on the device. So first we have a linear layout view group, and this is transparent because there's no background color set on it. The first child is a text view that says guest list, so that shows up at the top here. The second child is a text view that says Kunal, and that shows up below the first text view. Now if I copy this text view and paste it below this one, what do you think will happen? Yep, we have another Kunal that shows up right below the first one. Okay, so the pattern seems to be if we add more text views here, then they'll just show up one after the other in this list. Now let's look at the code more closely. It starts with an opening angle bracket and then the view name, which is linear layout. Then it lists a bunch of attributes, and then there's a closing angle bracket. Notice that there's no / because this is just the opening tag of the linear layout. The closing tag is all the way down here because we want to insert children elements in between the opening and the closing tag. But for example, for this text view, since there are no children within that, then we can just use a self-closing tag for it. Same for this text view here and this text view here. So when we say a view group contains children views, then we need to insert them in between the opening and closing tags. Now the other thing you may have noticed is this attribute called Android orientation equals vertical. We haven't seen this before, so let's look at the Android documentation like I showed you earlier. I open up a new browser window and then I type in Android orientation. The first result is about a linear layout, and it's on the developer.android.com site, so let's click on it. Just like the text view documentation was a little overwhelming, we can ignore most of this text. We just need to verify that this indeed is the page for linear layout, and then we scroll down and look at the XML attributes. Now we're looking for the attribute that is called Android orientation. And here it is, so let's click on it to look at more details. The description says that this attribute determines whether the layout should be a column or a row. The value of this attribute should be horizontal for a row, or the value should be vertical for a column. And then it lists those two values here. Cool, so our code currently says that the Android orientation is vertical, so that explains why the views are showing up as a column. Now to satisfy our curiosity, we should also try the other value. Let's set the orientation to be horizontal and see what happens. I'm going to go into the code and erase the vertical value. I'm going to type horizontal, and look, now the views are in a horizontal row. I don't know about you, but I don't really like to read my guest list horizontally, but there are still many other useful cases where you would want a horizontal linear layout. For example, if you're creating a list item, you might want an image on the left-hand side and then a description on the right-hand side. I'm going to let you try this out on your own in a second, but first I want to point out this additional line of code. This is the XML namespace declaration. We use this namespace in order to specify that all of these attributes here belong to Android. That's why they all start with Android:. This is essentially shorthand for this specific URL that's unique to Android. You can actually create your own custom attributes. So to prevent name conflicts, where two attributes are named the same thing but actually have different behaviors, we always add this prefix here, Android:, to signify that these are Android attributes. So basically, always remember to add this XML namespace declaration in the opening tag of the root view of your XML file. Now it's your turn. We want you to be able to experiment with the linear layout code now. Try to add more text views so there's more items in this column. Who would you put on an exclusive guest list for your party? Also try changing the linear layout orientation attribute. Remember that it can be set to vertical or horizontal.